Do you think injecting this high level of presidential politics complicates getting a settlement?
Well, I think right now we are in such a crisis in our economy, a crisis of inequality, that it is going to take a level of political and popular support unlike that we've seen.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Democratic Congresswoman of New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, discussing the United Auto Workers strike and the potential impact presidential candidates might have on negotiation as well as lawmakers. Both President Biden and former President Trump plan to be in Michigan this week. Biden will join workers on the picket line, and a day later, Trump will pass the second GOP debate out in California, instead to speak to current and former union members. Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens joins us now. Michigan seems to be the center of the political world this week. President Biden heading there tomorrow. We'll get to the auto workers strike in just a moment, but let's start with the looming shutdown on Capitol Hill. We just spoke to Scott McFarland, our correspondent. Where do you stand on where the negotiations stand?
Well, I'm eager to get something done. We need to keep the government open and running. We've had the appropriation season starting at the beginning of this year. The government runs out of funding on the 30th. If we don't have a deal, let's do the continuing resolution to keep the government running while we continue to negotiate. We certainly see Chuck Schumer over on the Senate side now getting in front of the House, believing that they're running out of time. They've cut their deal. We know that appropriations bills have been passing through on committee, but we've been stalled on the floor of the House. I don't want to get back to the legislative session this week and see us stall any further. And I certainly don't want to see a shutdown. That would be inexcusable.
What do you expect, Congresswoman, when President Biden comes to the picket line tomorrow? Is he going to just show solidarity, or do you believe he will in some way take a stand on the negotiations and really try to lean in on that front?
Well, look, it's not his negotiation to lead, but the president is coming in on the invitation from UAW President Shawn Fain, who's been doing a remarkable job communicating the demands of the UAW and obviously some of the inequities. And I'll say I was on the picket line in Pontiac, Michigan yesterday, talking with UAW members, and they are really excited that President Biden is coming into town. They were asking me about the visit. They were saying that it's really nice that a sitting U.S. president is coming to show solidarity. And Joe Biden is going to do what he does best, which is connect with people, listen to these workers. This is their moment, and this is their negotiation to lead. And the points are shining through about worker fairness, about a just transition, as we're leading the way here in Michigan with the new technologies seeding through the auto industry, frankly, technologies that were innovated on during a COVID-19 pandemic, just as we were responding to the industrial call to action with the supply chain disruption. So this does continue to be an exciting moment, and I think President Biden will meet the charge.
But when you step back, Congresswoman, do you see any political risk for President Biden appearing at a picket line? It's not a step a president often takes. He's decided to do so this time. You know Michigan politics as well as anyone. It's an important state for 2024. Is it all positive, you think, in terms of political gain for President Biden to have this kind of stand with labor, or could it cost him in other parts of Michigan? What's your read?
Well, I'll tell you this. If it was any other president besides Joe Biden, I would certainly understand what you mean about the risks. But nobody knows the auto industry like Joe Biden knows, and he has it in his bones. When we were campaigning in 2020, we had Joe Biden in the classic car. He loves this industry. And there's also certainly a respect for what's going on here, the outcome of this strike, the outcome of the negotiations. It's got to deal workers in. And I'll tell you this, as a lawmaker, I cared a whole heck of a lot about passing that Inflation Reduction Act, making sure that we were getting those EV tax credits. And now we know that this negotiation is recognizing what it's going to mean for workers. The Inflation Reduction Act and what we got done with electric vehicle tax credits and the like, certainly also for battery manufacturing production, is meeting a global charge. This is where the automakers have wanted to go. And the workers are now saying, we've got to have our fair share of this. We made sacrifices during the Great Recession. We made sacrifices during the auto rescue. We need to get rid of COLA. We need to get, it's not get rid of COLA. We need to achieve COLA. We need to get rid of the tiered wage system, but we need to achieve COLA. And certainly that's going to be an outcome of this negotiation, I believe, when it's said and done.
Former President Trump will be in your state, Michigan, on Wednesday to talk about some of these issues. Do you believe Trump would be welcome at the picket line outside the auto plants?
Well, I'll say this. He wasn't invited by the UAW. He got in front of the union, and the UAW president, Shawn Fain, has made it clear that he's not welcome. I find it quite peculiar that a former sitting president who should well know that not believing the polls is the way to be leading his campaign. And he's afraid to go and debate his opponents, some who worked in his very administration. And so he's playing politics. I have no idea what his presence is going to be like on the picket line. But I'll just say this, that the former president lost Michigan in a big way in 2020. He called into question the electoral results. People have paid the price for those conspiracies here in Michigan. And those politics just aren't welcome here. And frankly, his lies aren't welcome either. You have to remember, Donald Trump was the one who engaged in a Twitter war with the automakers, having no regard for the auto workers themselves.
Is Michigan in play in 2024?
I don't think we can take anything for granted. Michigan is absolutely a purple state. We're led by an incredible governor, Gretchen Whitmer. She had an overwhelming victory last November. She worked very hard to achieve that victory, and it was through honesty, integrity, and good governance. But Michigan is definitely still a swing state. I represent Oakland County, Michigan, and I'm already putting into place the markers to make sure that we get out the vote in November 2024.
Is this strike going to end anytime soon based on your conversations with union leaders, elected officials who are also involved? I mean, it must take a hit on the state at some point if these plants remained at least partly shuttered.
I'm listening to the auto workers, and that was a question I had on the picket line just yesterday. It was an almost 80-degree day here in Michigan. People were in shorts. They were carrying their signs. They were sharing their stories with me. And I was asking them, how are you doing? And people are energized for what is going to be the outcome of this strike and what this strike represents for the worker itself. You see Shawn Fain communicating on national TV, things that we haven't seen labor leaders be able to communicate in a long time. And so this is really a question, Robert, for the auto workers themselves. We have to listen to them right now. It is not up to me or any other lawmaker to be weighing in or putting pressure on, particularly at this time. We're 10 days into this strike. We're seeing some signs of progress, but I'm not ready to make a prediction on when this is going to come to an end.
Congresswoman Haley Stevens, we'll have to keep checking in with you. Appreciate you stopping by.